My name is Sally Lynn McDonald, and I'm going to be showing you Palettini designs today. We're going to be working with one of my realistic floral stamps. This one is called Sunflower Centers. It's P009. We're going to be working with this today to create a lovely realistic floral card, a nice little note card that you can give out or use as part of an art journal page or however you'd like to use it. The nice thing about this stamp is that it's like a color by numbers almost in this technique with the mediums we're using. They're very translucent. You can see through to the design that's stamped underneath. So it's really easy and a lot of fun and stress relieving. A lot of people are talking about coloring books for adults these days, and it kind of makes me giggle because stamping has always been that. So with rubber stamps, you're on trend. So let's get started and we're going to make this card. First things first. I think the secret to creating a cool, realistic background is layering, obviously. So we are going to be taking, once again, this stamped image from Sunflower Centers, and we're going to stamp it with Stays On. This is the Stays On Midi and Cloudy Sky. It's a great color. I love it because sometimes I don't want the harsh lines of black, but this shows up enough through the paint that I can see everything really well while I'm painting it. I'm using Art Anthology paints for this project. I'm using paints in Velvet, the ones with the black caps. These are matte colors. And I'm using Sorbet. These are the ones with these silver caps. They're sparkly. And then I'm also using Metal Effects. Once again, black lids, and they have a metallic effect. I like to work with a series of brushes, a couple of rounds, a couple of flat shaders. This is a particular set from Princeton Art and Brush, and I'll definitely put a link to it at the end of the video. But Princeton Art and Brush, they're relatively inexpensive, and they work well for almost any medium, so I really like to use these. So, first things first, we're going to start with Mayan Gold, which is a velvet, and velvet means it's got that soft, wonderful texture, it's slightly translucent, and no sparkle. Now, just to get started, we're just going to blend this into each of the petals. And this is really, like I said, color by numbers. You see where the flower is. You can kind of imagine some of these shapes. But the nice thing is, let me just show you as I get a little bit, oops. Even my application, if I do it slightly thicker like this, got a little bit too much here. It's very forgiving, even when I'm a goofball and fill it up too much. You see how you can see, still see here, all of the information that the stamp is giving you. So you're not covering that up at all. And this color, you'll notice I'm just kind of brushing things on. I'm not just randomly going through and scribbling everything in. Although I could, but because these paints are dimensional, I'd like to see the petals kind of get formed by the brush strokes. So I'm informing the petals of their shape. Got some on my barrel there like an idiot. So when you're painting, you're just kind of filling in these sort of blank spaces on this stamp image. But as you can see, it is dimensional. So as we go through, we're going to build up those layers of dimension as well. I'm just going to go off the edges on this. I'm sure I'll trim it down. But every bit of this image screams to be colored. Okay, so as you can see, we still see all of this detail around here. And I'll just start first by doing, I think I'll do just this one flower so you can see how it's been built. And we don't need to use that color again. So we put it aside. Now, these paints dry relatively quickly, even though I've done kind of a thick application in places, you know, it's still tacky, but the color's not really going to move that much, so I can move on to my next color. And I'm going to start by taking Actually, I'm going to take the Kona. This is a slight brown, and I'm going to use the Kona to start giving my petals just a little more dimension. So anywhere where I think that it's like shaded to one side. This is helpful to have a little bit of water on your brush, so when you're working with the colors you can like blend it a little bit better. There we go. I like to work with just a little bit of water on my craft sheet. And you see how I'm just hitting one side of each of the petals. And you know, in some places you can go, I think there's one there, there's one behind here. It's just such a forgiving little technique. That's what I like about it. And here, anybody's guess as to where the petals are. So do your own thing. Some texture here, there's some dimension here. And that's what you use kind of as a telling point of, okay, I'm going to go ahead and follow that line and do a little bit of texture there and a little bit of dimension there. And that's really all we're doing, just building up. So we started on one side of the petal, now we're kind of coming in to the base of each petal and just giving a little more oomph and blending it up. And a little bit of water is always your friend, just to soften lines. These paints dry remarkably fast, which is really, really fun because you don't really have to wait or use a heat tool to hit them. Okay, look how dimensional that is already. Already we're starting to see something that looks like a beautiful flower, and it takes such a little bit of effort. Now we're going to take Vegas Gold. Vegas Gold is one of the sorbet paints, and that means it's got sparkle. You can see the lid here. Lots of sparkle in there. And so that's a lot of fun to work with. And if you take a look at what we've done so far with the velvets, this is a very flat image right now. It just doesn't, like, nothing really stands out except for the colors. Now we're going to make things a little bit more stand out with the sparkle, as I like to call it. So I just want to add a little bit of this. And I'm going now along the, what I call the highlight side of every petal to kind of combat the dark that we already put in. Place this on the highlight side where the sun shines. And once again, these paints are very translucent, so we're not losing any of the detail of this stamped image. But actually, you know, by contrast, we're retaining all of it. And yet we can do this kind of color by numbers, layering of colors to give the depth and dimension that we want to our coloring. It's something that's really hard to achieve, I think, with just straight up inks, but much easier to achieve with a dimensional paint like this. So now we have more sparkle. Now, as a final step for the petal portion of this program, I tend to take Art Anthology Metal Effects. This one is gold. Don't let the color of the paint fool you. You know, it does not look gold once it dries. Then you get that effect. But I'm going to heat it up because I'm a brat. Now this is something that I tend to use a palette knife for. And I'm just going to get a palette knife out and place this around the inside, even though I'm going to cover up this inside with the brown paint later. So I can use it kind of as a play area. I'm going to put all this stuff here and use it as a landing space. If you don't have a palette knife, a plastic butter knife will do it. So you can see me do anything from pulling this out like this, and if you don't have a tool like this, I mean, that's okay. You can also use a paintbrush handle, one of your less favorite paintbrushes that you're not going to go grabbing right now to use because you'll have a messy handle. But you could use the handle to go in and draw some of that color out. And we're just kind of doing it in the direction of each of the petals. Okay? See how that works? So that is just at the very beginning of each of the petals. And this part, don't worry, you won't be able to see it later. Nothing wrong with that though. Now, in the center, we're going to just start with a layer of Kona. And Kona is kind of a funky little brown. And I'm blending it in with that gold just for pretty. And this is one of those places where I like texture. And Kona back into the mix, and then we have a bit of visual integrity between the petals and the flower because that Kona is already in there. Rinse out my brush. And then I'm going to grab a totally different color, Kenyan Copper. This is gorgeous. This is a sorbet paint. I'm sorry, my lid is not the right color, but this is a sorbet paint. And just take a little bit of this and kind of stipple it into the center. This has a lot of sparkle to it. So this will play off the Kona, which is a bit flatter, and then this Kenyan Copper just really has a lot of sparkle to it. And there's a little bit of gold mixed in as well. And then last but not least, I'm going to bring in also some of the copper metal effects. Let's stipple that in. And then I can literally go over it with my paintbrush and dot it. Because these are dimensional paints, they will take all of this texturizing. So now I'm going to take my heat tool just to speed up the process. As I mentioned before, the metal effects paints don't need a heat tool, they just need to dry in order to show their shine, but I do like to use it to speed up the process. Look how sparkly that is. Now, the flower has a lot of sparkle to it. For the background, I tend to use this velvet paints because they're more of a matte finish, and so I'm going to be using Limeade and Lagoon, two pretty greens, to create the background. So just a flat brush again. I do like to use a little bit of water. I'm going to spray a little bit onto my craft sheet here. Kind of break it up. And then I can go over the whole background here. This is a nice light color so it doesn't really affect the other areas too much. And there's just a whole bunch of foliage back here. I know there's a flower there. I'll get it later. For the purposes of this video, we're just going to focus on the one in the front. Okay, so now we have this nice, really light spring green going on. And then we'll bring in the other green. This one's Lagoon. I like Lagoon. It's a nice color. Really deep, foresty, but with a little hint of blue. I'm just going to stipple this in into mostly the darker areas of the stamp. I'll layer it around as imprecise as I can possibly be. I really am not into trying to be totally realistic because this is a very impressionist image. So there's very little point in trying to make these like perfectly leafy in the background. And we can use this to further outline the differentiation with the petals. Okay, and just because I tend to work this way, I kind of like to darken things up a little bit in the back. I'm going to put some thicker areas of lagoon in here. See how precisely I'm working? Because it's a dimensional paint, it's going to give me a little bit more fun in there. I can also wipe it off if I don't like what I just did, which was that case. Okay. Now, the paints dry remarkably fast, so I don't have to worry too much about that, although I did use some water in this case, so I'm going to zap it with the heat tool real quick because I can see it's still wet, but that's just because I'm using water. Okay. I tend to take something like Kona. Kona is a little bit of a brown, but I like to use that to kind of earthen up the background a bit. A little bit of shower behind the, add a little shadow behind the petals. And it just adds depth once again. It's all about layering. And as I said to you, it's like these colors are translucent, so you can layer and layer and layer. You get all kinds of yum out of them. Okay, so there's the depth and dimension that I was looking for with the foliage. Now it's less painted and more painterly. Just to show you that this can go a lot faster than when I'm talking about it, I'm going to quickly do the other flower in the background. So once again, we're going to start with Velvet, the Mayan Gold, to do the base of the petals. Then we'll follow up with Kona Velvet once again to do one side of each petal to create that look of shading. Now it's time for the sparkle. The Vegas Gold Sorbet comes out to play on the other side of each of those petals. And then Gold Metal Effects is placed in the center and brushed out either with the end of your handle or with a texture tool into the rest of the petal. I start the center with Kona in Velvet, come in with Kenyan Copper, which is a sorbet, and just stipple it in around the area, and add that final bit of sparkle. The Copper Metal Effects is also stippled in, and then the back of the paintbrush handle is used to create dimension. I was a little careful when I was painting the green area before because I hadn't done this flower yet, so I'm just coming back in with my watered down lagoon to go around the petals and make sure that they have a good contrast against the background. Now this is an optional last step, but if there's any white spaces, or if I just want to kind of unify the whole thing, I like to go for my colorations. And these are just a water-based spray. They're fabric permanent. I'm going to take first this green. It's called Guacamole. And I'm going to spray that over the top. And don't panic. Underneath is actually going to totally resist this, the painted areas, which is honestly just about everything. But I'm going to just dab it off of my flower. But let it stay built up on the background. And the nice thing about these sprays, just to be clear, they don't have any mica or glitter in them, no sparkle. Once again, it's going to be flat, so the background will retain that flatness, while the flowers will come to the foreground because of the sparkle. So that's just part of what we're doing here, to kind of play with how the paints work, as sparkle in the foreground, matte in the background. So I'm also going to bring in, this is a color called Lark, because I just like a little bit of a blue to deepen up my green. And once again, I can take my really ugly rag and just kind of dab it off the flower. But I can also grab the edges, because that's fun. Okay, and just dab it off the flower. Clean up a little bit. Oh, it's so painful to do that. And now if we want to, we can heat set it. What's nice is doing that little bit around the edges you saw me doing. It kind of creates that watercolory look. You could just let this dry naturally, but I'm going to go ahead and let it curl up and dry. And the nice thing is, if I don't like something, like I don't like the little puddling right there of the green, I'm just going with a paintbrush and get rid of it. See, these paints keep it real. One of the things I really like about a project like this is that it has real life factor, the oopsie factor, the oh, I had to go unload the dishwasher and forgot to come back and do my painting, and it's okay because I'm just layering, so I can come back and work on it some more. Because they're like a gel medium based paint, you can go in there and move things around. When I'm doing that final task with the layering, with the colorations, I can just wipe things off and get them off of certain areas and leave them on others, or go back and re-wet something so that it moves. So real life work, creating really pretty art. All of these stamps are available from Technique Junkies. They're from my Palettini collection, which was designed exclusively for Technique Junkies, and available at techniquejunkies.com. Thanks for watching.